In this lecture, we're going to play with events. We're going to subclass QWidget as you see here, and we're going to play with some of these events. Let's go to Qt Creator and do that. Here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to create a new Qt widget application. We're going to call it Events Demo, store it in a location on our drive, hit Next, choose our kit. It's going to be based on QWidget, and we're going to finish. This is going to create our widget class. Let's go to the header file, and you see that it is a subclass of QWidget. To see what event handlers we can play with this class, you can go to the help and look at the documentation for QWidget. This is one way. So let's scroll down, and we're going to find the event handlers that are available for this class. Let's go down a little bit, and you see them here. They are under the protected functions section. You have action event, you have drag move event. We are looking for mouse events. That's what we want to play with first. We have mouse press event, mouse release event, and probably mouse move event. Yeah. So you can look at it here. You can copy the signature of this event and come in the class that you created, add a protected section for these things. So protected, put that here and clean this up a little bit, and you have your event. It is an override method, so let's say that, and we can implement it. Okay, refactor, add definition in widget CPP, and we can respond when somebody presses the mouse on this widget. This is one way to override event handlers in your own widget classes, but there is a better way that I like better, and I'm going to show that to you. So let's delete what we have so far here and use another way. Let's go to the header. You can select the class name and right click, and you're going to choose refactor, and there is an option to insert virtual functions for the base class. So you can click that, and you can choose the methods that you want to override. This is much easier. So we're going to find mouse press event. It is here. Mouse release event. It is here. And I think we have mouse move event right here. So we're going to select the event handlers that we want to override, and we're going to click OK, and they're going to appear here. One thing I don't like is that the protected section is down below here. I'm going to move it in the middle here. And this is just personal preference. You can leave it there if you want. Now we have the overrides, and you see that Qt Creator starts complaining about this destructor here. It wants me to flag it as an override as well. So let's do that. We can implement these methods in the CPP file. Mouse release event and mouse move event. And here we are. Now we can be notified whenever the mouse is pressed on this widget, whenever the mouse is moved, or whenever the mouse is released. Let's try that. We're going to include QDebug and output a message whenever somebody presses, moves, or releases the mouse in this widget. We're going to say QDebug, mouse pressed. We can copy this and put that in other locations as well. Released, and do the same for mouse moved. Let's actually put the name of the widget that is outputting this message. That's going to be easier for debugging. And widget. Now we can run the application and see what it looks like. And the application is here. If we click, you see that they say mouse pressed and released. Let's press again. Mouse pressed, I move it, it says mouse move, I release it, it says mouse released. So we know when the mouse was pressed, moved, and released on this widget here. We can even do more. Let's fetch some more information about these events. We're going to include QMouse event. And we can say at location and output that location. So we're going to say event position. Let's do the same here at position and do the same If we run the application again, we're going to see that if we press the mouse, it's going to say where we pressed. Let's move the mouse. You're going to see that the values are changing. We are actually working in the coordinate system of this widget. If I move to the top left, you see that it's going to be close to 0. And the 0 point is at the top left here. You see that we have 1, 0. And if we move down and to the right, the values increase. You can see that we are capturing the location of the mouse event. Okay, let's release the mouse and you're going to see that we also have the location. Let's go back to the header and see if we can play with some other events. Let's see some of the available ones. We have a close event that I want to show you for now. It is here, so let's override it. I copied these things to the other events because I want to stay organized. Otherwise, you'd go crazy with these things. We have our event here. Let's implement in the CPP file. And if you want to know what this event does, you have the option to select it. Hit F1 and you're going to select the class you want to see the information for. In this case, we are working with the widget, so we choose QWidget class. And the documentation shows up here. You can open in help mode to see things in full here. This event handler is called with the given event when Qt receives the window close request for a top level widget from the Windows system. So it is in this event that we are notified when our widget is about to be closed. And we can use that to know when our widget is about to be closed. So if the particular application that we are designing uses this information, this is where we capture that. So we can qdebug, widget about to close. Let's run. Click, widget about to close, and the widget closes. One thing I want you to see is that you can accept this event or ignore it and influence how things happen in your application. So for example, let's say event accept, run the application and see what happens. If you close, things happen as usual, but if you ignore, let's run again. You close the application and nothing happens. Okay, you are ignoring the event. This hopefully shows you that you can play with these flags to kind of influence how things happen in your application. But I want you to be very careful because the behavior we see in the close event here is not what you see in most of the other events. Okay, now you know how you can do some things with the close event. Let's go back to the header. We want to play with another event that I want you to see, and that one is going to be context menu event. Let's find it. It is right here, so let's override it. We want to implement this in the CPP file. And if you look in the documentation for this event, let's do that. This is a good habit to get into, to go in the documentation to read more about the things you are using. We want to see for QWidget as usual. Let's open in full help mode, and we're going to see this event handler can be re-implemented in a subclass to receive widget context menu events. This handler is called when the widget's context menu policy is. Okay, so this really doesn't say much, but you can use this to pop up dialogues, for example, when somebody clicks on your widget with the right button on the mouse. We're going to play with this. Let's go in here and say context menu event in QDebug just to see that this works. Now we can run the application. And if you right click, you see context menu event with the right button on your mouse. Another thing you can do is trigger that by clicking the menu button on your keyboard. Okay, I am clicking it and we are having this context menu event triggered in our application here. Okay. Now we want to come back in the implementation and I want to pop up a menu here. So we're going to use the QMenu class. Let's visit it in the documentation. And they say a few things about it. provides a menu widget for use in menu bars, context menus, and other pop-up menus. We want to use a context menu. You create it and you add actions to it. And you can read all these things about this class if you want. Let's go back in the code, include QMenu because we are about to use it. And go back to our context menu event and put in the code for our menu. Control A, Control I to align. We just create a menu like this on the heap. We add actions to it. We want action 1 and action 2. Now that we have the menu in place, we can pop it up. We can show it in our widget. The way we do that, you say menu and say pop up. But notice what you have to do. You have to pass in the location where this menu is going to pop up. We're going to let it pop up where this event was triggered, the position the mouse was at when this event was triggered. So we're going to say event position. That's what we want. Let's run the application and see what happens. Now we want to trigger this event. You already know how to do that. You can click the right button on your mouse and see what happens. The pop-up doesn't show up in our widget. It shows up at this location here. Why is this happening? The position we pass to this pop-up method is in relation to the screen. And you can see that we can actually try and push it to the top by just going to the 0, 0 coordinates in the widget. And you see that it tries to pop up in the 0, 0 coordinates of the window. So this suggests that the coordinates we pass in here are in relation to the screen. It's not in relation to the widget here. And we are clicking in the widget here. The way you fix this, you map the coordinates you pass here to the global coordinates using a method called map to global. And this method is available in the QWidget class. We're going to look at it in a minute. Let's pass in the parameters and say pose, just like we did before. Now, if we run the application, we right click and you see the action menu pop up. This is how you would use a context menu event, but you can do all kinds of crazy things with this event here. Let's go to the documentation for map to global so that you see it for yourself. Let's open in full help mode and translate the widget coordinates position to a global screen coordinates. And this is what we just did here. Just to recap, we have the coordinates of this widget that start at this 0, 0 position, and we have the global screen coordinates that start to the top left of the screen here. And this is how you would use these things in the context menu event. There are a few other things you can query on this event. For example, you can capture the location where this happened. Let's see that we can capture it. And if we try and trigger that event, you see that it's triggered at this location. Okay, it is available as part of this position that we showed here. It is just two different ways of doing the same thing. You can query the reason for the context menu event. We have seen that you can trigger this event either by clicking the right button on your mouse or by hitting the menu key on your keyboard. Let's see that we can capture which method was used to trigger this event. You can use the reason method on it, just like this. And if you run, we trigger it, and you see that the reason is 0. I am hitting the right button on my mouse. Let's click again to get rid of this. I hit the menu button on my keyboard, and you see that the reason is 1. Let's look at the documentation and see that we can see the explanation for what we just saw here. So let's go there, F1. Open in full help mode, reason, and you see that we have the enums here describing what just happened. Context menu mouse is 0. Context menu keyboard is 1, and this is exactly what we saw. And we have 2 as other. And they say that the event was sent by some other means, not by the mouse or the keyboard. This may happen, for example, if you trigger this event and send it yourself. And we're going to see how you do that later in the course. You don't need to worry about that now. Let's go back to our header and see that we can play with some other events. The other events we're going to look at are enter and leave event. Let's find them and put them in here. We have leave and enter here. Let's implement them in the CPP file. Move to CPP. And if you look in the documentation for QWidget, and it's going to say this event handler can be re-implemented to receive widget enter events which are passed in the event parameter. This is going to allow us to know when the mouse enters our widget, and we can do some things if we are interested in this event. We are just going to debug output and know that this event happened. Let's do qdebug and do qdebug leave event. We can run the application, and if we come in, you see that we know enter event, we leave, we have the leave event. This is what you can use it for. We also have a key press event, which is really interesting. It allows you to capture key presses on the keyboard. Let's find it here, key press event. We implement that in the CPP file, and we can say qdebug key pressed and say the key that was pressed. We're going to say event key. Let's see what this gives us. I press I on my keyboard and it gives me a number. I can keep pressing and you see that the keys are represented by numbers. How can I get the text for the key that was pressed? Let's see if we can do that. We can also use the text method on this event. Let's put a colon in here and say event text. This will probably give us the text of the key that was pressed. A, B, C. You see that we have the text for that. This is how you would use this. You can also use modifiers. For example, if you wanted to detect that the key was pressed along with the shift modifier, you would do something like this. Okay, and say key pressed with shift. We can actually say shift plus and put the key that was pressed in here. We just learned how to do that. Key. Okay, this will be much better. Let's run the application. Let's hit Shift H. We used key. We should have used text. Let's run. And Shift A, we have this. Shift B, Shift B, we have that. And you see that we can detect the modifiers. You can do the same things for the other modifiers. For example, for the control modifier, we can copy this and say control modifier here. And you can find all these things in the documentation. I'm not going to go there. You already know how to do that. Let's run. Control A. You see that we can detect that. And you see that for some reason, they give us the text in Unicode when you press the control key. This is a good thing you can research for. I really don't know why. But we're going to move on. We just want to learn about events in this lecture. We can copy this, paste it again, and change this to Alt. Okay, you can use it. We're going to say Alt. And I don't think I showed you when I did this, but I commented this line out just to have something clean to look at here. It was messy. Let's run. Let's press Alt A. You see that? Alt B. You see that? You see that it's really doing what we want. And you can replace in all the other modifiers that you may want. Before we leave this event, I want you to see a way you would detect a key pressed with the modifier, a more professional way of doing this. We would do what we've been doing all along. For example, if we wanted to detect Shift A, we would do that. But in here, we would detect the key that was pressed. So we would say F event key equals. Let's look at this method and see what we can pass in here. Key event class. Let's look in here. We have cute key. Okay, this is good. You can see cute key A. Do we have those? Let's see, Qt key A. Yes, we have that. So if we wanted to detect the pressing of the key A with shift, we would do something like this. I think it's going to work. Let's do that and try. Okay, QDebug, shift plus A, detected. Let's try this. And just to have this clean, I don't want it to conflict with this, so I'm going to kind of comment this out and run the application. I'm going to press Shift A, and you see that it is detected. And these are just ways you can play with the key press event. Let's go back to the header and see if we can play with some other events. We also have the wheel event, which is triggered when you rotate that little wheel on your mouse. So let's implement it, refactor, and find it in the window here. I think it should be somewhere down below. Is it there? Let's look a little bit. Okay, let's use the filter here and say wheel event. Okay, so this is what we want. We can hit OK. Okay, now we can implement this in the CPP file. And we can output some information about this event. You see, we can get the delta. Let's go in the documentation and see what this delta is. And the first thing you see is that this function is deprecated. You shouldn't use it. They do recommend to use the pixel delta method. So let's use that, pixel delta, but they still haven't told us what it does. We can look at this in the documentation, returns the scrolling distance in pixels on the screen. Okay, if you want to use this, and they give a good example of how you would use this method. For now, we just want to see that it triggers. We're really not interested in too much details about it. Let's run and see what happens. I rotate my wheel and you see it says the location where my mouse is. I don't know if you can rotate it horizontally. They say Qt vertical. This is weird, but you see that you can use this event. One thing that may be important is to try and know if the wheel was rotated upwards or downwards, so you can do some things in your application. I think the delta method used to do that pretty well. Let's try to run it and see what happens. We rotate it up. Delta is 120. You rotate it down, it says minus 120. This was an easier way to detect if it was rotated upwards and downwards. But you can do that with some effort using these parameters that you see here. You can compare the Y positions. I think we're going to have a chance to play with that as we progress in the course, so we're not going to say any more about this event. You use it to detect the rotation of the wheel on your mouse. Okay, this is what you use it for. Let's go back to the header. The last two events we're going to look at are the resize event and the paint event. I'm just going to put in here for speed. Let's refactor and implement them. Refactor, implement in CPP. Resize event, let's go to the documentation. That's the best place to learn about your events. We want to see the information for the QWidget class. Let's find it down here. And they say this event is used to receive widget resize events, which are passed in the event parameter. Okay, this resize event is triggered whenever your widget resizes. So what we can do is print the old size and the new size as we resize our widget. We can run the application, and as we resize this, you see that the widget is resized, and they give us the old and the new size. And some applications do need this information. And if your application happens to be one of them, you're going to use this a lot. The last event is the paint event, which is kind of important. Let's go in the documentation and look at it. For QWidget class, it is really used to paint your widget whenever it is needed. For example, our application here, when we minimize it, it is invisible on the screen, but when we make it visible again, the Windows system is going to repaint it, and it uses the paint event to repaint the widget. This is what it does. You can also trigger repaints yourself. You can call the repaint method and the update method. We're going to have chances to play with these things as we progress in the course. Just for now, note that this event is used to paint your widget. This event happens a lot of times in your application. So let's do QDebug to let you see for yourself. Paint event, triggered. We can run this and you can see that even before we do anything, it is triggered. As we move, nothing happens, but as we resize, the paint event is being triggered. You see that? Let's clear the output here and make our window visible again. You see that it is triggered. Okay, it is triggered whenever this widget needs to be repainted by the Windows system. This is what it does. And we're going to have chances to draw some cool stuff using this event as we progress with the course. This is what we set out to do in this lecture. You now know about many of the events that are available that you can play with in your Qt applications. You know how to work with them. You know how to look in the documentation and fetch some information about them.